She took her mother's place as a maid. What she did next left the billionaire boss speechless. The hospital fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Emma Rodriguez held her mother's trembling hand. At 25, she'd imagined her life would look different. Maybe she'd have finished her business degree, perhaps started that nonprofit she'd always dreamed about. Instead, she sat in this sterile room, watching her mother, Maria, struggle to breathe through another coughing fit. "Mija," her mother whispered, her voice barely audible over the beeping monitors. "You have to let me go back to work. The medical bills." "Absolutely not," Emma interrupted, squeezing her mother's hand gently. "Dr. Patterson said your lungs can't handle it anymore. 20 years of cleaning with those harsh chemicals, Mom. Your body is telling you to stop." Maria's eyes filled with tears. For 2 decades, she'd worked as a housekeeper for the Blackwood estate, one of the most prestigious homes in Greenwich, Connecticut. The job had put Emma through community college, kept a roof over their heads, and provided health insurance that was now barely covering the mounting costs of her mother's treatment for chemical pneumonitis and early-stage COPD. But the Blackwoods, "Mr. Alexander, he's always been fair to me. I can't just quit. We need—" "I'll take your place," Emma said suddenly, the words escaping before she'd fully thought them through. Her mother's eyes widened.
"No, Emma.
You're meant for bigger things. You have your education, your dreams." "My dreams can wait," Emma said firmly, though her heart ached at the truth of it. "You've sacrificed everything for me. Now it's my turn." That night, Emma lay awake in their small apartment in Stamford, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Her phone showed a half-finished application to Yale's School of Management, due in 3 months. She'd been working 2 jobs to save for the application fee and eventual tuition, dreaming of the day she could start a foundation to help immigrant families like her own. But dreams were luxuries, and love required sacrifice. The next morning, Emma dressed in her mother's spare uniform, a simple black dress with a white apron that smelled faintly of lavender and lemon polish. It hung loose on her smaller frame. She braided her long dark hair the way her mother always did and took the train to Greenwich, her stomach knotted with anxiety. The Blackwood estate sprawled across 15 acres of pristine Connecticut countryside. The mansion itself was a Georgian masterpiece, all white columns and red brick, with gardens that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. Emma had seen it only in the photos her mother showed her, never imagining she'd walk through its service entrance herself. Mrs. Pembroke, the head of household staff, greeted her with a stern expression. She was a British woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and sharp blue eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. "So you're Maria's daughter," she said, looking Emma up and down. "Your mother is an excellent worker. I hope you understand the standards we maintain here." "Yes, ma'am," Emma replied, standing straighter. "My mother trained me well." "We'll see about that. Mr. Blackwood is particular about his privacy and his home. He's recently returned from London and will be working from the estate for the foreseeable future. You're to be invisible, efficient, and absolutely discreet. Do you understand?" Emma nodded, though her curiosity was piqued. Alexander Blackwood. She'd heard the name, of course, who hadn't? At 33, he was a billionaire tech entrepreneur who'd revolutionized cybersecurity. Forbes called him a genius. Business Insider called him a recluse. Her mother called him a good man who carries a heavy sadness. The first week passed in a blur of polishing silver, scrubbing floors, and learning the intricate layout of the 40-room mansion. Emma barely saw Alexander Blackwood. She heard him, though, conference calls in his study, the opening and closing of doors, the occasional sound of piano music drifting through the halls late at night. She worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life, determined to prove herself worthy of the job that was keeping her mother afloat. Every evening, she'd return to the hospital, too exhausted to do more than hold her mother's hand and assure her that everything was fine. "How is he?" her mother would ask. "Mr. Alexander?" "I haven't really met him," Emma would reply. "Mrs. Pembroke says he prefers solitude." What she didn't tell her mother was how the mansion felt haunted by loneliness. For all its beauty, it was a house without warmth, a showcase without a soul. She'd seen the photographs in the hallway, Alexander with an elegant blonde woman, both smiling at some charity gala. But the woman was absent now, and Emma had overheard the kitchen staff whisper about a broken engagement, a betrayal, a heart turned to stone. On Friday of her second week, Emma was cleaning the library, a two-story room filled with leather-bound books and mahogany shelves, when she found it, a small watercolor painting tucked behind a stack of financial journals. It showed a garden in bloom, painted with amateur enthusiasm but genuine feeling. In the corner, a signature. For Alex, to remind you that beautiful things still grow. Love always, Mom. Emma's throat tightened. She understood loss, the way it carved holes in your life. Carefully, she set the painting on the mantel where it could be seen, a small spot of color in the somber room. She didn't know that Alexander Blackwood stood in the doorway, watching her. She didn't see the way his jaw tightened, or the flicker of something, surprise, pain, recognition, that crossed his face. But she would. Alexander Blackwood had meant to stop at the library door. He'd been heading to his study, mind already churning through the merger details his legal team had sent over, when he'd heard someone humming softly. The melody was familiar, an old Spanish lullaby his own mother used to play on the piano before she passed away 5 years ago. He paused, watching the young woman dust his bookshelves with careful attention. She wasn't Maria. This woman was younger, moving with a different energy, less tired, more purposeful. When she discovered the painting, his painting, the one he'd hidden away because looking at it hurt too much, Alexander felt his chest constrict. His mother had given it to him 3 months before the cancer took her. She'd painted it in the estate gardens during her final spring, determination overriding the weakness in her hands. "Never let grief make you forget beauty," she told him. "Promise me, Alex." He'd broken that promise. After his mother's death, his father had become obsessed with the business, driving himself into an early grave 2 years later. Then came Victoria, his fiancée, who'd seemed to love him until she loved his money more. He'd found her in their penthouse with his former best friend and business partner, both of them laughing about how easy it had been to manipulate the brilliant but emotionally stunted Alexander Blackwood. After that, he'd retreated here, to the estate, to solitude. He told himself he preferred it this way. No vulnerability, no betrayal, no pain. But watching this stranger tenderly place his mother's painting where it belonged, something cracked in the walls he'd built. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice coming out harsher than intended. Emma spun around, nearly dropping her dust cloth. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Alexander saw a young woman with intelligent dark eyes, her face showing surprise but not fear. She wore the staff uniform, but it somehow didn't diminish her. There was a dignity in the way she stood, a quiet strength. Emma saw a tall man in an expensive but rumpled shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. His face was striking, sharp jawline, intense green eyes that seemed to look right through her. But it was the exhaustion around those eyes that caught her attention, the weight of someone carrying too much alone. "I'm Emma Rodriguez," she said, finding her voice. I'm filling in for my mother, Maria. She's been unwell." Something shifted in Alexander's expression. "Maria's daughter. Is she all right?" The genuine concern in his voice surprised Emma. "She will be. The doctors say with rest and treatment, she should recover. I'm here to make sure she can do that without worrying about her job." Alexander nodded slowly, his gaze moving to the painting on the mantel. "You moved that." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. I can put it back."
No.
The word came out sharp, then softer. "No, it's fine where it is. Thank you." An awkward silence stretched between them. Emma wasn't sure if she should leave or continue cleaning. Alexander seemed equally uncertain, as if he'd forgotten how to navigate normal human interaction. "Your mother," he finally said, "she's worked here for 20 years. She never mentioned having a daughter pursuing a degree." Emma blinked. "She told you about that?" "Maria talks about you constantly. Her daughter, the future MBA, who wants to change the world." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "She's very proud." Tears pricked Emma's eyes unexpectedly. I'm not pursuing it anymore. Family comes first. That's admirable, Alexander said quietly. But also, perhaps, a waste. Before Emma could respond, his phone buzzed. His expression shuddered immediately, becoming the cold mask she'd heard about in the staff's whispered conversations. Continue with your work, he said curtly and left. Over the following weeks, their interactions remained brief, but strangely charged. Alexander would appear unexpectedly, in the conservatory while she watered plants, in the kitchen when she was preparing his breakfast tray, in the hallways during her rounds. Each time, he'd ask a question or make an observation that revealed he was paying attention in ways that made Emma's heart skip. You rearranged the books in the library, he noted one morning, by topic rather than author. I'm sorry, I thought it would be more practical. It is. I like it. Another day, you put fresh flowers in my study. Gardenias. They're my mother's favorites. I can change them if. They were my mother's favorites too. The staff noticed the changes in Alexander. He emerged from his study more often. The late-night piano playing returned, not the melancholy pieces but fuller, richer compositions. Mrs. Pembroke even remarked that he'd smiled at breakfast, something she hadn't seen in 2 years. But Emma tried not to read too much into it. He was her employer, a billionaire who lived in a different universe. She was just the maid's daughter, temporarily filling a role until her mother recovered. Then came the day everything shifted. Emma was in Alexander's study, replacing books she'd borrowed to read during her breaks. She'd been careful never to take them without permission, but she couldn't help herself. His collection was extraordinary, ranging from classical philosophy to contemporary poetry. She'd just slid a volume of Pablo Neruda back onto the shelf when Alexander entered. "You're reading my books," he observed. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "Which one did you like best?" Emma hesitated. "The Neruda. Though your translation of Rilke is incredible. Did you make those margin notes?" Alexander moved closer, looking at the books she'd referenced. "Yes. Columbia University, undergraduate philosophy degree, before I switched to computer science. My mother insisted I have a well-rounded education." His fingers traced the spine of the Rilke. "You read German?" "A little. I minored in languages at community college. Spanish, German, and some French." She felt suddenly self-conscious. "I always thought understanding how people communicate in their native tongue helps you understand how they think." Alexander turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Most people assume I'm just a tech entrepreneur. They don't bother to look deeper." "Most people are intimidated by brilliance," Emma replied before she could stop herself. "It's easier to keep someone in a box than to acknowledge their complexity." For a long moment, Alexander just looked at her. Then, "Have dinner with me." "I'm sorry." "Dinner. Tonight. Not as employer and employee. Just as two people who might enjoy a conversation." Emma's heart raced. This was dangerous territory. "Mr. Blackwood." "Alexander." "Please." "Alexander," she amended softly. "I don't think that's appropriate." "Probably not," he agreed. "But I find I don't care. When's the last time you had a conversation about something other than medical bills or cleaning supplies? When's the last time I had a conversation about anything that mattered?" Emma should have said no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that having dinner with Alexander Blackwood was a terrible idea, a crossing of boundaries that could only lead to complications she couldn't afford. But there was something in his eyes, a loneliness that mirrored her own, that made the word, yes, escape her lips before she could stop it. "Okay," she whispered. "But not here. Somewhere neutral." Alexander nodded, understanding implicitly. "There's a small Italian restaurant in the village. Nonno's. Do you know it?" Emma almost laughed. Nonno's was where her mother had taken her for every birthday, back when money wasn't quite so tight. It was cozy, unpretentious, the kind of place where the owner knew your name and your favorite dish. It was also the last place anyone would expect to see Alexander Blackwood. "I know it," she said. 7 o'clock? I'll meet you there." Emma spent the rest of the day in a daze, mechanically completing her tasks while her mind spun. What was she doing? This man was a billionaire, her employer, someone so far out of her league it was almost laughable. And yet, when she allowed herself to remember the way he looked at her, really looked at her, like she was someone worth seeing, her stomach fluttered with something dangerous and wonderful. She left the estate at 6, rushing back to the apartment to change. Her wardrobe was limited, but she found a simple navy dress her mother had bought her for job interviews. It was modest but flattering, and when she paired it with the silver earrings her grandmother had left her, she felt almost pretty. At the hospital, her mother was having a good day, sitting up and reading. "Mija, you look beautiful. Do you have plans?" Emma hesitated. She'd never been good at lying to her mother. "Just dinner with a friend." Maria's eyes sparkled with knowing. "A friend? Anyone I know?" "Mama, you deserve happiness, Emma. You spend all your time taking care of me, working yourself to exhaustion. Go. Enjoy yourself." If only her mother knew who the friend was. Nano's was quiet on a Tuesday evening, just a few regulars scattered among the red-checkered tablecloths. Emma arrived first, her nerves making her early. She was about to text Alexander when he appeared at the door. He changed too. Gone was the rumpled businessman, replaced by someone who looked almost boyish in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater. His hair was still slightly messy, but it seemed intentional now, and when he spotted her, his face transformed with a genuine smile that took her breath away. "You came," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might come to your senses and realize this is probably a bad idea." Emma laughed despite herself. "Oh, I realized that. I came anyway." Antonio, the owner, approached with menus, doing a double-take when he recognized Alexander. But to his credit, he simply smiled warmly. "Mr. Blackwood, Miss Emma. Welcome. Can I start you with some wine?" They ordered, and as Antonio disappeared, an awkward silence settled. Alexander fidgeted with his napkin, and Emma realized with surprise that he was nervous. "I should confess something," Alexander said finally. "I haven't done this in a while. Eaten Italian food? Had dinner with someone I actually want to talk to." The honesty in his voice disarmed her. "Then we're even. I haven't had a conversation that wasn't about medical copays or cleaning schedules in months." They started talking then, really talking, and Emma discovered that Alexander Blackwood was nothing like she'd expected. Yes, he was brilliant. That became clear as they discussed everything from philosophy to politics to their favorite books. But he was also funny, self-deprecating, and surprisingly vulnerable when he let his guard down. He told her about growing up with parents who loved each other deeply but struggled to show him the same affection. They were so wrapped up in each other, and then in the business. I was the heir, the legacy, the next generation of Blackwood excellence. But I was never just Alex. Emma listened, her heart aching for the lonely boy in that big mansion. "My mother was different," he continued, his voice softening. "She saw me, especially after my father died, and it was just the two of us. She'd make me stop working and just sit in the garden with her. She'd say, 'Alex, what's the point of building an empire if you forget how to enjoy a sunset?'" "She sounds wise," Emma said gently. "She was. And I failed her. After she died, I threw myself into work. Then I met Victoria, and I thought." He trailed off, pain flickering across his face. "You don't have to." "I want to," Alexander interrupted. "Victoria was everything I thought I wanted. Beautiful, sophisticated, from the right family. We got engaged after a year. I thought I'd finally figured out how to do the relationship thing." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out I was just convenient." The brilliant but emotionally distant billionaire was easy to manipulate. Emma reached across the table, covering his hand with hers before she could think better of it. "That says everything about her character and nothing about yours." Alexander stared at their joined hands, then turned his palm up, intertwining their fingers. "How are you so wise at 25? Poverty is an excellent teacher," Emma said wryly. "You learn quickly what matters and what doesn't." She told him about her childhood, about watching her mother work 3 jobs to keep them afloat, about being the scholarship kid at school who wore secondhand clothes and brought rice and beans for lunch while other kids had Lunchables. But she also told him about the richness of their life, the way her mother sang while cooking, the Sunday gatherings with their extended family, the fierce love that filled their small apartment. "We didn't have much," Emma said, "but we had each other. That was everything." "And now you're sacrificing your dreams for her," Alexander said quietly. "That MBA program at Yale, your mother mentioned it once. Said you'd been preparing for years." Emma pulled her hand back, suddenly defensive. "It's not a sacrifice. It's love. It can be both." They argued then, gently but passionately, about duty and dreams, about what we owe the people who raised us versus what we owe ourselves. Alexander challenged her in ways no one else ever had, refusing to let her hide behind noble self-sacrifice. "You're allowed to want things," he insisted. "Wanting your own life doesn't make you selfish." "Easy to say, when you have the luxury of choice," Emma shot back. "When you don't have to choose between your mother's health and your education." "You're right," Alexander admitted. "I can't understand that kind of pressure. But I understand what it's like to lose yourself in duty. And I don't want to see you make the same mistake." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, favorite movies, embarrassing moments, dreams they'd had as children. Emma learned that Alexander had wanted to be a pianist before his father convinced him music was a hobby, not a career. Alexander learned that Emma had wanted to be a veterinarian until she realized she could help more people by understanding business and economics. Hours passed without them noticing. Antonio eventually approached, apologetic. "I hate to interrupt, but we're closing soon." They were the last customers in the restaurant. Emma checked her phone and gasped. It was past midnight. She had to be at the estate in 7 hours. "I should go," she said reluctantly. Outside, Alexander walked her to her car, a battered Honda Civic that had seen better days. The contrast between their vehicles, their lives, felt suddenly stark. "Thank you," Alexander said, "for tonight. For seeing me as just a person." "Thank you for the same," Emma replied. "Though I should probably tell you this can't happen again." "Why not?" "Because you're my employer. Because we live in different worlds. Because you're scared," Alexander finished. "I am too. But Emma, when's the last time you felt this alive?" She couldn't answer because he was right. For the first time in months, she'd felt like herself, not just a caregiver or a maid, but Emma, with thoughts and dreams and worth. "Think about it," Alexander said softly. "No pressure. But think about it." He waited until she was safely in her car before walking to his own, a modest sedan, she noticed, not the flashy sports car she might have expected. As she drove away, watching him in her rearview mirror, Emma knew she was in trouble. Because she'd already decided. Tomorrow, she'd be professional, keep her distance, remember her place. But tonight? Tonight, she'd let herself feel everything. Emma tried. God, how she tried to maintain professional distance after that dinner. She arrived at the estate early, completed her tasks efficiently, and avoided the areas where Alexander typically worked. But the mansion that had once felt enormous now seemed too small, every hallway a potential encounter, every room holding the possibility of him. And Alexander wasn't making it easy. The morning after their dinner, Emma found a gift on her cleaning cart, a leather-bound journal with a note tucked inside. "For your thoughts, dreams, and plans. They deserve to be preserved." The next day, there was a book, a first edition of 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, her favorite author. The day after that, she discovered he'd anonymously paid 3 months of her mother's medical bills. "How did you know?" she demanded, cornering him in his study after Mrs. Pembroke had mentioned the mysterious benefactor. Alexander looked up from his laptop, not even pretending innocence. "Your mother needed help. I could help. Simple mathematics." "That's not mathematics, that's—" Emma struggled for words, emotions warring in her chest. "That's too much. I can't accept it." "Why not?" "Because it changes things. Because now I'm indebted to you, and this power dynamic is already complicated enough." Alexander stood, moving around his desk to face her. "Is that what you think? That I'm trying to buy you?" I don't know what to think. Emma's voice cracked. You're my employer. You're a billionaire. I'm the maid. This whole thing is impossible. Only if we decide it is, Alexander said quietly. Emma, I paid those bills because your mother has been loyal to my family for 20 years and because watching you exhaust yourself trying to care for her breaks my heart. There's no ulterior motive. There's no debt. If you want me to stay away, I will. But don't reduce what I feel to a transaction. The vulnerability in his voice undid her. What do you feel? Alexander stepped closer, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his green eyes. I feel alive for the first time in years. I feel like maybe the world isn't as cold as I convinced myself it was. I feel like I want to know everything about you, your favorite color, what makes you laugh, what you dream about at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep. Blue, Emma whispered. I laugh at terrible puns. And I dream about a world where love doesn't have to be a choice between people. What if it doesn't have to be? Alexander's hand rose, hovering near her face, asking permission. When she didn't pull away, he gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. What if there's a way to care for your mother and pursue your dreams? What if you let someone help carry the weight? Emma closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. I'm so tired of being strong. Then don't be. Not right now. Not with me. She let him pull her into his arms then, let herself break down in a way she hadn't allowed since her mother's diagnosis. Alexander held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring words of comfort that weren't quite English, German. She realized the language of his mother's mother, words of safety and care. When she finally pulled back, embarrassed by the wet spot on his shirt, Alexander smiled gently. Better? I don't know. Maybe. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing for having feelings. It's actually quite refreshing. Most people I know have had their emotions surgically removed. Emma laughed wetly. Is that what happened to you? Emotional surgery. Self-inflicted, Alexander admitted. After Victoria, I decided it was safer not to feel anything. Turns out that's not living. It's just existing. They stood there in his study, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, and Emma felt the last of her resistance crumbling. This was terrifying and wonderful and completely insane, but it was also real in a way nothing had been for so long. I have a proposal, Alexander said. A business proposal, before you get worried. Okay. Let me set up a trust for your mother's medical care. Not a gift, an employment benefit. She's devoted 20 years to this family. She deserves security. That frees you to pursue your MBA. I have connections at Yale. I could. No, Emma interrupted firmly. Alexander's face fell. I'm sorry, I overstepped. No, you're not listening. I don't want your connections or your influence. If I get into Yale, it'll be because I earned it. But she took a deep breath, making a decision that terrified her. But I would accept help with my mother's bills. Not as charity. As a loan. I'll pay you back every penny once I'm established. Emma, that's not necessary. It is for me. I need to know I'm not giving up who I am, even as everything changes. Alexander studied her face, then nodded slowly. A loan. We'll draw up proper paperwork, set reasonable terms. Deal? Deal. Emma extended her hand to shake on it, but Alexander took it instead and brought it to his lips. You're extraordinary, he murmured against her knuckles. You know that, right? Before she could respond, Mrs. Pembroke's voice echoed from the hallway. Miss Rodriguez? Are you still in the study? Emma jumped back, her face flushing. Alexander stepped away smoothly, already adopting the cool businessman facade, though his eyes danced with amusement. Yes, Mrs. Pembroke, Emma called, her voice admirably steady. Mr. Blackwood had some questions about the library organization. Very well. When you're finished, the dining room needs attention. As the footsteps retreated, Emma caught Alexander's eye, and they both struggled not to laugh. The absurdity of it, sneaking around like teenagers, hiding whatever this was from the household staff. This is ridiculous, Emma whispered. Completely, Alexander agreed. Also the most fun I've had in years. Over the following weeks, They developed a careful dance. Publicly, Emma remained the professional maid, and Alexander the distant employer. But they carved out moments: early mornings in the garden before the other staff arrived, late evenings in the library after everyone else had gone home, stolen conversations in empty hallways. Emma learned about Alexander's work, the cybersecurity innovations he was developing to protect people's privacy in an increasingly digital world. It's not just about making money, he explained one evening, showing her the beta version of a new encryption system. It's about giving people control over their own information, especially vulnerable populations. She told him about her business plans, her dream of creating a nonprofit that provided microloans and business education to immigrant families. So many people come here with skills and dreams, but no access to capital or knowledge of how American business works, she said passionately. I want to bridge that gap. You will, Alexander said with such certainty that she almost believed him. But they both knew they were living in a bubble, a temporary suspension of reality. The staff was starting to notice the way Alexander's mood had lightened, how Emma had been seen leaving his study on multiple occasions, the flowers that appeared weekly in her locker with no card attached. The bubble burst on a Tuesday afternoon when Victoria Ashford Montgomery swept into the mansion unannounced. Emma was polishing silver in the dining room when she heard the commotion, Mrs. Pembroke's flustered protests, the click of expensive heels on marble, and then a woman's voice, cultured and sharp. Don't be ridiculous. I don't need an appointment to see my fiancé. Ex-fiancé, came Alexander's cold voice from the foyer. What are you doing here, Victoria? Emma's hands stilled on the silver. She shouldn't eavesdrop, but she couldn't help herself. Darling, don't be childish. We both said things we regret. But I've had time to think, and I realize we belong together. The merger with my father's company, the social connections, the perfect life we planned. The perfect life you planned, Alexander interrupted, while sleeping with my business partner. A mistake. One I've regretted every day since. James meant nothing. You're the one I love. Emma felt sick. She should leave, give them privacy, but her feet wouldn't move. You don't love me, Victoria. You love what I represent. There's a difference. Is this about that maid? The little cleaning girl I saw leaving your study last week. Victoria's laugh was cruel. Please tell me you're not slumming it out of some misguided revenge fantasy. The sound of Alexander's palm hitting the marble table made Emma jump. Get out, Alexander.
Get out of my house.
Emma heard the retreating footsteps, the slam of a door, then silence. She stood frozen in the dining room, Victoria's words echoing in her head. The little cleaning girl. Slumming it. Was that what people would think? That she was some kind of gold digger, or worse, that Alexander was using her as a rebound? Emma. She turned to find Alexander in the doorway, his face pale. You heard. It wasn't a question. Emma nodded. I'm sorry you had to hear that. Victoria is. Right, Emma interrupted. She's right. This is insane. I'm your maid, Alexander. People will think. I don't care what people think. Well, I do. Emma's voice rose. I care that people will look at me and see someone who slept her way to opportunity. I care that your business associates will think you've lost your mind. I care that this could hurt both of us in ways we can't predict. The argument in the dining room hung between them like smoke, thick and suffocating. Alexander stared at Emma, his jaw tight, struggling with emotions he'd spent years learning to suppress. So that's it. His voice was dangerously quiet. Victoria shows up, says some poisonous things, and you're ready to run? That's not fair, Emma shot back, her own anger rising to meet his. I'm being realistic. You live in a world where appearances matter, where a bad quarter makes headlines and relationships are strategic alliances. I can't be that for you. I won't be a rebellion against her. Is that what you think this is? Alexander moved closer, his eyes blazing. Some kind of reaction to Victoria? Emma, I haven't thought about her in weeks. She's irrelevant. You. He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. You make me want to be the person my mother believed I could be. You make me remember what it feels like to hope. Emma's resolve wavered, but she forced herself to stay strong. And what happens when the novelty wears off? When you realize I don't fit into your world? When your board of directors starts asking questions about why you're dating the help? Then I'll tell them the truth, Alexander said fiercely. That I found someone real in a world of fakes. That I found someone who challenges me, who sees me, who makes me want to be better. Stop, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. Please stop making this harder.
Why?
Why should I make this easy? Why should I let you walk away from something that could be extraordinary because you're scared? Because I have to protect myself. The words burst out of Emma like a dam breaking. Because I've watched my mother sacrifice everything for love, for family, and I've seen how the world treats people like us. We're disposable, Alexander. We're the ones who clean up after people like you, who make your lives comfortable, and then we're forgotten. I can't. I won't be another person you forget when something shinier comes along. The cruelty of her words registered immediately, but it was too late. Alexander's face went blank, all emotion carefully erased. It was worse than anger. It was the return of the mask, the walls slamming back into place. I see, he said coolly. Thank you for clarifying your perspective on my character. I apologize for the confusion. It won't happen again. He walked out, leaving Emma alone in the dining room, her heart shattering into pieces.
For 3 days, they didn't speak.
Alexander left the estate early and returned late. Emma performed her duties mechanically, her eyes red from crying into her pillow each night. The other staff noticed the change. How could they not? But no one dared comment. Mrs. Pembroke finally pulled Emma aside on Friday afternoon. I don't know what happened between you and Mr. Blackwood, she said, her usual sternness softened with concern. But I've worked for this family for 15 years, and I've never seen him the way he's been these past weeks. Whatever you did, you woke something in him that's been dead since his mother passed. I didn't mean to, Emma whispered. Maybe not. But you did. And now you've put it back to sleep. Mrs. Pembroke sighed. I'm not one for meddling in affairs of the heart, but I'll say this. Fear is a terrible reason to give up on happiness. God knows that boy has had enough people in his life choose fear over love. That evening, Emma visited her mother at the hospital. Maria was doing remarkably better. The treatments were working, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic. But when she saw Emma's face, her improvement seemed to reverse. Mija, what's wrong? Emma tried to smile. Nothing, Mama. I'm just tired. Don't lie to your mother. I've known that face since you were 5 years old. This is about more than tired. This is about heartbreak. The whole story came tumbling out then. The dinner, the growing connection, Victoria's visit, the terrible fight. Emma told her mother everything, expecting judgment or concern. Instead, Maria laughed. Mama, I'm sorry, Maria said, wiping her eyes. It's just, you sound so much like me at your age. So determined to be practical, to protect yourself, to sacrifice happiness for safety. That's not. It is, baby. And I understand why. You've watched me struggle, watched me work myself sick for people who barely noticed I existed. You've learned to expect so little from the world. But Emma, do you know what my biggest regret is? Emma shook her head. That I taught you to be afraid of dreaming too big. Your father, he was like Mr. Alexander. Impractical, idealistic, convinced love could overcome anything. When he died and left us with nothing, I decided practical was better. Safe was better. I taught you to protect your heart by never giving it away. Maria took her daughter's hands. But that's not living, Mija. That's just surviving. What if he hurts me? What if he doesn't? What if this is your chance at something real, something beautiful? Are you really going to let it go because of fear? Emma stayed at the hospital late that night, talking with her mother about love and risk and the courage it takes to be vulnerable. When she finally left, she knew what she had to do. But first, she had to face her own demons. Emma spent Saturday writing. She pulled out the journal Alexander had given her and filled page after page with her fears, her dreams, her truth. She wrote about growing up watching her mother scrub other people's floors and vowing never to be in that position. She wrote about the shame of poverty, the way it makes you feel less than human. She wrote about the walls she'd built to protect herself and the terror of letting someone see behind them. And she wrote about Alexander, his kindness, his loneliness, the way he looked at her like she was precious. She wrote about the person she became when she was with him, braver, more hopeful, more herself. By Sunday morning, she had a plan. She arrived at the estate before dawn, her stomach in knots. The house was dark, but she knew where to find him. Alexander's insomnia was legendary among the staff. He was often awake before sunrise, working in his study or playing piano in the conservatory.
Today, he was at the piano.
Emma stood in the doorway, listening to him play. It was the saddest piece she'd ever heard, full of longing and loss. When he finished, she spoke into the silence. That was beautiful. Alexander's hands froze on the keys. He didn't turn around. What are you doing here? It's your day off. I came to apologize. And to tell you something important. Emma,
Please.
just listen. She walked into the room, moving to where she could see his face. I said terrible things to you. Things I didn't mean. You're nothing like what I accused you of being. You said what you needed to say to protect yourself, Alexander replied quietly. I understand that. Maybe. But it wasn't fair, and it wasn't true. The truth is, I'm terrified. Not of you, but of wanting this so much. Of wanting you so much. Emma took a shaky breath. I've spent my whole life learning to expect disappointment.
It's safer that way.
But then you came along and made me want to hope again, and that's the scariest thing in the world. Alexander finally looked at her, and the naked emotion in his eyes nearly undid her. I wrote something, Emma continued, pulling out her journal. I want to read it to you if you'll let me. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Emma opened the journal with trembling hands. This is called What I'm Afraid of. She read then, her voice shaking but steady. I'm afraid of needing someone more than they need me. I'm afraid of building my life around someone who might leave. I'm afraid of being seen as less than because of where I come from. I'm afraid of loving you and having it not be enough. But I'm more afraid of living my whole life playing it safe. I'm more afraid of becoming someone who forgot how to hope. I'm more afraid of looking back and wondering what if. I'm more afraid of never telling you that you've changed everything. When she finished, the silence was deafening. Alexander stood, crossing the space between them in 3 strides. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Emma Rodriguez, he said, his voice rough with emotion, you are the bravest person I've ever met. Braver than any CEO I've faced down, braver than any investor I've pitched to. And I am completely, utterly in love with you. I love you too, Emma whispered. God help me, I love you too. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff all at once, terrifying and perfect and right. They stood there in the conservatory as the sun rose, holding each other, talking through tears and laughter about how they'd make this work. Alexander promised to support her dreams, not replace them. Emma promised to let herself be loved, to trust that not everyone would leave. We'll figure it out, Alexander said.
Together.
No more hiding, no more pretending this isn't real. Your board is going to hate this, Emma said, but she was smiling. They'll learn to deal with it. And if they don't, I'll find new board members. The announcement came 2 weeks later, though not in the way anyone expected. Alexander didn't issue a press release or hold a press conference. Instead, he invited the entire household staff to a formal dinner in the main dining room, something that had never happened in the estate's history. Mrs. Pembroke nearly fainted from shock. As the bewildered staff gathered around the antique table, dressed in their uniforms but seated as guests, Alexander stood at the head with Emma beside him. Thank you all for coming, he began. I know this is unusual, but I wanted to share some news with you first, before it becomes public knowledge. He reached for Emma's hand, and the room went silent. Emma Rodriguez and I are in a relationship. I know that raises questions about propriety and protocol, so let me be clear. Emma will no longer be working as household staff. She's been accepted into Yale's MBA program for the spring semester, and I couldn't be prouder. Emma squeezed his hand, overwhelmed by the genuine happiness on the faces around the table. Even Mrs. Pembroke was smiling. However, Alexander continued, I also wanted to use this opportunity to announce some changes to how we operate this household. Maria Rodriguez has given this family 20 years of dedicated service. She shouldn't have had to work herself into the hospital to receive the health care and retirement security she deserved. He outlined a new benefits package for all household staff, comprehensive health insurance, retirement contributions, paid time off, and educational assistance for family members. This house only functions because of your work, he said simply. It's time that was properly valued. Later, after the staff had dispersed, Emma found Mrs. Pembroke in the kitchen, wiping her eyes. That man, the older woman said, shaking her head. He's been different since you arrived. More human, if you will. I thought after his mother died, after that horrible woman broke his heart, that he was lost for good. But you found him. I think we found each other, Emma said softly. The media reaction, when it came, was predictably mixed. Some outlets praised Alexander's progressive relationship and workplace reforms. Others questioned Emma's motives or painted her as a Cinderella story, which she hated. But Alexander had been right. With transparent honesty and genuine love, most of the noise faded into background static. The real test came when Emma started at Yale. She'd insisted on doing it properly, no special treatment, no shortcuts. She lived in student housing, studied with her cohort, and worked twice as hard as everyone else to prove she belonged there on merit. Alexander supported her from a distance, careful not to overshadow her achievements. He attended her presentations when invited, celebrated her successes, and held her when the stress became overwhelming. But he never solved problems for her, never pulled strings, never did anything that would let her doubt her own capabilities. How are you so good at this? Emma asked one night during finals week, as he brought her coffee and sat quietly reading while she studied. Good at what? Loving me without trying to fix everything. Alexander looked up from his book. Because I learned from the best. You showed me that real love is about supporting someone's strength, not compensating for perceived weaknesses. In the spring of Emma's first year, Maria Rodriguez was finally well enough to return to work part-time, not as a maid, but as the estate's new household manager, overseeing the staff and implementing the improved policies Alexander had introduced. She took to the role naturally, her years of experience and genuine care for the people who worked there making her perfect for it. Can you believe it, Mija? She said to Emma during one of their weekly dinners.
Management.
Your father would have laughed. He would have been proud, Emma corrected. Just like I am. The first real crisis in Emma and Alexander's relationship came during her second semester. A venture capital firm offered Alexander a deal that would require him to relocate to Silicon Valley for at least a year. It was an incredible opportunity, one that would expand his company exponentially. He turned it down without consulting Emma. You did what? She demanded when she found out. Alexander, that was $100 million deal. And you have a year and a half left at Yale. I'm not asking you to disrupt your education for my career. That's not your decision to make alone. We're supposed to be partners. They fought about it for days, not about the specific deal, but about the pattern it represented. Alexander's instinct to protect her, to sacrifice for her, was bumping against Emma's fierce independence and her fear of being a burden. I need you to trust me to make my own choices, Emma finally said, exhausted. Even if those choices involve sacrifice. Even if they're hard. And I need you to trust that I want to support your dreams without agenda, Alexander replied. Not because I'm trying to control you, but because I love you. They found a compromise. Alexander would take the deal, but structure it so he could work remotely part of the time, splitting his time between Connecticut and California. Emma would use the summers to intern with his company, gaining real-world experience that would complement her studies. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. A solution built on mutual respect and honest communication. The distance was hard. They video called constantly, ran up enormous phone bills talking until dawn, and learned to express love through small gestures across the miles, care packages, unexpected flowers, playlists of songs that made them think of each other. But the distance also proved something important. What they had was strong enough to survive separation, mature enough to grow independently while remaining connected. Emma's thesis project became the foundation for what she'd always dreamed of, a nonprofit organization called RACES, Roots, that provided microloans, business education, and mentorship to immigrant entrepreneurs. She pitched it at Yale's annual social innovation competition and won first place, along with $50,000 in seed funding. Alexander was in California when he heard the news. He immediately booked a flight, arriving just in time to see Emma's celebration dinner with her cohort. "You did it," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You built something real, something meaningful, all on your own." "Not entirely on my own," Emma said, smiling up at him. "You taught me to dream bigger. My mother taught me to work harder. And my father," her voice caught, "he taught me that love is the foundation of everything." A year later, on a sunny day in May, Emma Rodriguez graduated from Yale School of Management with highest honors. Her mother sat in the front row, crying happy tears. Alexander sat beside Maria, recording every moment on his phone, his pride evident to everyone around him. But the real surprise came afterward, at the celebration dinner Alexander had organized. He'd rented out Nano's, the same restaurant where they'd had their first unofficial date, and filled it with everyone who mattered: Emma's extended family, her classmates, the household staff from the estate, even Mrs. Pembroke. As dessert was being served, Alexander stood, tapping his glass for attention. "2 years ago," he began, "I was convinced I knew what life was supposed to look like. Success was measurable in quarters and stock prices. Relationships were strategic alliances. Emotions were liabilities. I'd built an empire, but I'd forgotten how to build a life." He looked at Emma, his eyes shining. "Then this extraordinary woman walked into my house and changed everything. She challenged me, inspired me, and loved me even when I didn't deserve it. She showed me that real wealth isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you give, who you love, and the legacy you leave." Alexander got down on one knee, and Emma's hands flew to her mouth. "Emma Rodriguez, you once told me you were afraid of building your life around someone who might leave. I'm here to promise you that I will never leave. I will stand beside you as you change the world. I will celebrate your victories and support you through challenges, and I will love you with everything I have for as long as I live." He pulled out a ring, not the massive diamond one might expect, but a delicate band with 3 stones, a sapphire, an emerald, and a diamond. "Blue for your favorite color, green for growth, and diamond for the strength you've shown me. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, Emma managed to whisper, "Yes." The restaurant erupted in applause. Maria sobbed openly. Mrs. Pembroke had to sit down, and Antonio brought out champagne on the house, while muttering happy curses in Italian. Later, as they slow danced to music from Antonio's old jukebox, Emma rested her head on Alexander's chest. "I can't believe this is real," she murmured. "Believe it," Alexander said, kissing the top of her head. "We built this together. 2 people from different worlds who chose love over fear." "Do you ever regret it? The complications, the media attention, the board members who still think I'm after your money?" "Never. Not for a single second. You know what I regret? All the time I wasted before you. All the years I spent believing walls were safer than windows." Emma pulled back to look at him. "What changed?" "You did. You walked into my life and reminded me that beauty still grows, even in the darkest places. You took your mother's place as a maid and ended up teaching a billionaire what it means to be rich." 5 years later, Emma and Alexander Blackwood stood in the garden of their estate, not the imposing mansion in Greenwich, but a smaller, warmer house in New Haven, close to the community RACES now served. The garden was in full bloom, tended by Maria, who'd retired from household management but couldn't stop nurturing things that grew. Inside, the sound of a baby crying rose, then quieted as a grandmother's lullaby began, the same Spanish melody that had first drawn Alexander to Emma all those years ago. "She has your mother's voice," Alexander said, wrapping his arms around his wife from behind. "And your stubbornness," Emma replied, leaning into him. "Did you see her refuse to nap today? Pure Blackwood determination. They stood together, watching the sun set over the garden they'd built, the life they'd created. On the patio table sat Emma's laptop, open to a draft grant proposal for Races' expansion into 5 new cities. Beside it, Alexander's notebook was filled with sketches for a new encryption program that would provide free cybersecurity to nonprofits. "Do you remember what you told me that night in the conservatory?" Emma asked. "When I finally admitted I loved you? That we'd figure out together? You said no more hiding, no more pretending this isn't real." Emma turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become her partner in every sense of the word. "Thank you for keeping that promise. Thank you for teaching me it was a promise worth keeping." Inside, Maria began singing a new verse of the lullaby, and their daughter's delighted laughter rang out. Alexander and Emma smiled at each other, then headed inside to join their family. Because in the end, that's what they'd built. Not just a love story, but a family, a legacy, a proof that different worlds could merge when 2 people were brave enough to bridge them. Emma had taken her mother's place as a maid, yes. But what she'd done next had left everyone speechless, including herself. She'd refused to be defined by circumstances, had fought for both love and independence, and had shown that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch and the courage we find to be vulnerable. And Alexander? He'd learned that the greatest return on investment isn't financial. It's the joy of loving someone who sees you, challenges you, and chooses you every single day. Together, they'd proven that fairy tales don't require glass slippers or magic spells. Sometimes, they just require 2 people willing to work hard, love deeply, and build something real from the wreckage of what they thought life should be. As the stars came out over their garden, Emma thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago, exhausted, scared, convinced that dreams were luxuries she couldn't afford. If she could tell that girl anything, it would be this: don't be afraid to want more. Don't let fear masquerade as practicality. And never, ever underestimate what can bloom when you're brave enough to plant hope in the hardest soil. Because sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the smallest acts of courage, like a daughter taking her mother's place, a billionaire admitting his loneliness, and 2 hearts deciding that together they were stronger than apart.